one. Okay.
All right,
Okay,
Mike.
Justin?
Yeah, how are you feeling about all that? Are you good?
Yeah, kind of.
You know what, when we get back to game management and some question items at the end, if there's anything you want to cycle back to, that's
Yeah.
all good. Okay. All right. So let's switch over now to our defensive conferences, and there's a little bit more nuance to this rule than the offensive conferences. And a lot of it has to do with the age categories and the number of conferences. So first of all, I always love quoting the rule book, only because it's our fail safe. There's no opinion in terms of, the wording here. So we're talking about whenever an umpire grants time to the defensive team or suspends play to allow them to have a defensive team rep enter the playing field to communicate with any fielder, or if a fielder goes to the dugout or bench area and gives the umpire reason to believe that instructions were received. So not to go too deep on this, but to pick it apart a little bit, we know what a defensive conference usually looks like. It's usually a coach calling time to go and speak with their pitcher. And that's the usual. And most defensive conferences are exactly those. But don't limit your thinking to just those interactions as being defensive conferences. Certainly it's possible that a coach could go out and want to talk to the shortstop or the catcher for some particular strategic reason. That's a defensive conference. I've certainly been witness to, and it's happened in my games where maybe because it's a signs thing, a catcher goes over to the bench to get some clarification on signs, and that's a defensive conference. The idea is not to be ticky-tacky with defensive conferences, but there also are rules to follow regarding that, and we're certainly looking at them on the screen. So of course, teams are allowed a certain amount of defensive conferences per game. So, and this is fitting with the new age categories for this year for Softball Canada and also Softball Ontario. So gone are U16, U14, U12, and introduced our U17 and up. They get 3 per 7 innings. So 3 defensive conferences per 7 innings. If you're talking U15, that's a very special category. It has its own rule, 5 per 7 innings. And if it's U13 and below, there is no such rule. The rule is waived. There is no limit in terms of a hard and fast number that the defensive team is allowed. Now, if what's entering your mind right now is, yeah, but what if they're taking all kinds of conferences and you're thinking about time limits? Those are great thoughts, by the way. If you're having those, we're going to park those and maybe leave those for the end when we get to game management strategies regarding defensive conferences, especially as you think about U13 and below. A lot of us are experienced officials and we work all kinds of ball, but let's not mistake ourselves when we get into a U13 or below game. We have strategies I'm sure that we know that we want to use, but these are also strategies that sometimes we want to impart to younger officials about, situations like this. What happens with extra innings? Well, you get 1 per extra inning if your game ends up there. This comment's not important for U13 and below because, again, they don't have a conference rule anyway. So when we say 3 per 7 innings and we say 5 per 7 innings, those are, I don't know how else to really put it other than freebies. There's nothing that the defensive team is required to do when they go and have these conferences. Now, what happens if we get to a 4th conference or a 6th conference, if we're talking U15? So that's where we get into, and I should back up here. So as an example, let's say it's a U17 game and a coach is going out, but they're actually making a pitching change. That's not a conference if a pitching change is being made. That's not ruled or determined to be a conference. So let's say they've had one conference and it's the second inning and that's their first conference. And then the fourth inning, they actually change pitchers. You might be tempted to indicate that that was a second conference, but it's not. If a pitcher is being changed, it's not a conference. So, and we're going to get to this in a moment, counting these conferences correctly and perhaps even documenting them becomes important because during the game, there could be a series of reasons why a coach has gone out to the pitcher. Maybe they're making a change, maybe they're not, and counting these things correctly, is very important. So what happens if a team wants a fourth defensive conference? And I say conference in quotes because it's not going to be a conference in the sense that they must change pitchers. So what we have by rule book terminology is the pitcher becomes an illegal pitcher. And just so we're clear, an illegal pitcher is somebody who can no longer pitch in the game. So this could be the same pitcher who has had 3 conferences, I guess, occur when they were the pitcher. The fourth time that coach comes out and wants to have a conference, it won't be a conference at all because the pitcher is going to get changed because this would be, beyond their 3 conferences. And this also applies in extra innings. They get 1 conference, but now if there's going to be a second visit to the pitcher is certainly going to get changed, and every pitcher there on in during that inning. So about counting up these conferences, to the best of my knowledge, Softball Canada doesn't have a mechanic or a protocol per se as to what should an umpire do with respect to these counting of conferences. So what I'm about to give you is more suggestion than it is, what you'll find in, say, a Softball Canada umpire's manual. So what I would tell you is if you have a lineup card and you're working a game that has lineup cards, use the back of that lineup card to document your conferences. And it doesn't need to be anything fancy or special. It needs to be something that you understand such that you can communicate with a coach in case of any dispute about how many conferences have I had. So my recommendation is to indicate the inning and the number of outs. So just flip the card over, B2, comma 1. I think, now actually I don't have that example on my slide here, but that would be something that I would write. So I would take out my lineup card. Let's say it's the yellow team. I would take out the yellow team's lineup card, turn over to the back, B2, comma 1. So that later on in the game, when I say, coach, that's your second conference or that's your third conference, and they say, no, wait, when? I can with confidence pull out the lineup card and say, well, you had one in the second inning here with 1 out. You also took one in the fourth inning when the bases were loaded and there were 2 out. And if you can recall that kind of detail to the coach, not only does that give you tremendous credibility in terms of settling that dispute, but boy, it sure shows in terms of an overall perception, this umpire is really on it. Now, we don't always work games with lineup cards. So now you might say, yeah, what about those other 95% of the games that I work? Well, my suggestion would be if you don't have your own way of controlling this as the plate umpire, this is a time to utilize your official scorekeeper. So what that might look like is either before the game, once you find out who the home team is and where their official scorekeeper is, and some of you might actually do this already. You might quickly introduce yourself, hi, I'm Justin, you are, oh, and the person is, I don't know, Patty, like, oh, hi, Patty, I'm going to be giving you changes. You can just give me a simple thumbs up when you understand or something like that. That'll help. I'm also going to be telling you about conferences. So if I look over at you and say, that's a conference, can you please indicate for that team that it's a defensive conference somewhere on your score sheet? Again, Softball Canada doesn't have a protocol in place, to the best of my knowledge, for umpires or for scorekeepers. So this is more of a recommendation that I have for you, that trying to keep it clean, trying to keep it easy, and perhaps trying to keep it consistent from umpire to umpire. This might be a good way to keep track of those conferences. Because as much as we all fancy ourselves on having great memories and, remembering things with great detail, when it's the sixth game of the tournament and it's a hot sunny day and maybe it's your third game of the day and suddenly something happens and you're like, oh man, how many conferences is that? You could end up into a tough situation where you have conflicting information or recounting of information between the two teams. And we just want to avoid those situations if we can. All right. So Mike has prepared an animation, and I want to give all credit to Michael Morrissey here as being a PowerPoint wizard.
I'll take it.
There you go. So depending on what's on your screen right now, if you have like the people that are involved in this Zoom meeting covering up any part of the animation, if you have the ability to do so, either click and grab and drag that pane of people somewhere else on the screen, or if you know how to minimize that pane, because once I hit play on this animation, I want you to see all of the things that are on the screen. So Mike has put together basically a very routine looking defensive conference where a coach is going to go in and talk to the pitcher. We have all done this countless times, but maybe each of us have perhaps a different way that we kind of handle things. And again, it's just nice animation to look at here. So once I click play, I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to let it play all the way through. It doesn't have any sound. It just has a little bit of like audio boxes and movement of people. But then I'm going to play it one more time and I'll narrate over it the second time. So with that said, I'm going to click play on this and let's see what happens next. All right, and that's the extent of the animation. We don't have the part where the umpire hustles back to the plate and the coach hustles off the field, but that would be the last part of that. So we know what we were just looking at here, but I'm just going to play it one more time because I want Mike to get all of the fun of this being played a couple of times, because this is, first of all, if you've ever done animations in PowerPoint before, they are not easy to do. So I want everybody to see and appreciate what Mike's done here. But we know what happens. The coach calls time. We honor the request of time by also saying time. Probably not with that much delay, but we get the idea. So coach heads on out to the pitcher's circle. And this is our opportunity to clean the plate rather than standing there. Hustle out from behind home plate, get in there, clean the plate. And what I would say about this is, even though you are stalling for time, don't crouch down and sweep the plate lazily. Get in there, clean that plate, and then move up to your spot along whichever baseline that coach needs to come back through to get to their bench. Okay? And while you can't really appreciate how this umpire is moving, move aggressively. Like, don't march like you look like you're angry, but also don't waddle and meander. Make purposeful steps, get to your spot. You can see, we got to go, coach. Everybody has their own phrase at this point, depending on probably the context of the game too. But make sure you notify to the coach, yep, that's one. That's your first defensive conference, or that's your second defensive conference, whatever the number is. And then, like I say, the part leaving here is, hustle back to the plate. Get the mask on, get the catcher in there, get the batter in there, and let's resume the game. And hopefully the coach has hustled their way off the field as well. Okay. So, those are just some extra comments in there. I've seen lots of umpires, because they know they're stalling for time, they sweep the plate almost in a lazy, slow-like manner. And then when they leave the plate to meander their way up the baseline, they almost look like they're like a lost child. Hey, any steps we take on the diamond should be done with purpose and look like that we absolutely know what we're doing. So get in there and sweep the plate aggressively like you normally will. And then when you're done, put your brush away, move with purpose up the baseline. And then when you are ready to break up that conference, move with purpose out to the pitcher's circle. Okay.
Justin,
Yes,
can I
Mike?
just chime in here?
Sure.
Now, so on an offensive charge conference, similar, move with purpose. You're coming out from behind home plate. You're sweeping the plate. Doesn't matter if it's spotless. You're still sweeping it. And I do the Jim Bradford offensive charge conference timing, and all of this is timing, and because you want to create the same amount of timing for both teams. So you do the same thing the same way. That way, both teams get the same amount of time. On an offensive charge conference, whichever side you're going to, either the first base coach or the third base coach, it's a quick sweep of the plate, and it's a purposeful, brisk walk. This is what I do, and it's the Jim Bradford way. It's a brisk walk to the base. You're going right to the base, and Jimmy he'd either kick it fair, and it's already fair, or he'd sweep it. He'd turn his butt to the outfield, and he'd sweep it. He'd do one or the other. He either pretend he was kicking it fair, or he would sweep it off. And like basically, so as Justin says, with purpose, he's out there for a reason. But the reason he's out there is it's a good time. He's given that coach the same amount of time, and he better be done by the time he's done with the base. And if he's not, we got to go, coach. That's your one, coach. Again, it's just developing a timing to keep the same for both teams.
All right, Mike, you're up next. Charge defensive delay.
So charge defensive delay. Putting on these webinars isn't easy. So I deflect responsibility wherever I can. So we have a gentleman in the audience tonight who I've spoken with, and I've cleared it with our lead administrators. This rule came about in 2019, and the guy that wrote the rule is with us tonight, and Mr. Jeff Whipple, our National Director of Umpires. If you could make yourself known to us and turn your mic on and give us a brief rundown on where this rule came about.
Hi, Mike. Thanks for the introduction and the opportunity to join you guys tonight. Always looking forward.
I'm just trying to make my life easier. It's all about me.
It's all about you. Always is. Yeah. This is a pace of play rule, and we're seeing it in all aspects of sport, especially bat and ball games. Major League Baseball has been experimenting with pitch clocks, and they've had a rule that limits the number of times pitchers and catchers can talk during a game for the last couple of years, and they're trying to speed up the game. So in 2019, that summer, there were a few tournaments, 19 and above, mostly on the men's side. In fact, all on the men's side. So 19 men, 23 men in particular, but also the men's open, where pitchers and catchers were having an excessive number of conferences, and that the games were 2.5 hours long. which is way too long to be playing for a fast pitch game. So, and there were a couple of flagrant, I guess, instances where there was one catcher and pitcher who were almost getting together almost every pitch. Now we know that WBSC has addressed pace of play by bringing in a pitch clock, but at the international level, it works great because as soon as the catcher is able to return the ball to the pitcher, they have to, and they got 20 seconds to pitch. And if they want to walk it back into the pitcher, they're counting 20 seconds. So so they've addressed it through the introduction of a pitch clock. Unfortunately, at the local level and even at Canadian Championships levels, the introduction of a pitch clock is just really not very practical for our purposes. So we were looking for something a little more simple. And we looked at Major League Baseball, where they limit the number of catcher-pitcher conferences, number of visits by the catcher to the pitcher. I believe it was 7 during a whole game. We thought that was a little hard to track, so we wanted to keep it even simpler. So what we did is we looked at a solution that was 7, or that was one per inning. It was that simple. And if there's a second infraction after the first one, then it's a ball in the batter. We didn't want to make the penalty to be too great. We didn't want to have it an illegal pitch because then we got runners advancing. So we thought a ball in the batter was a pretty fair penalty for them. So that's really where it came from. The board, there was a couple of tournaments in particular in 2019 where it was noted, and the reports that came back was that the games were just running too long. And so we thought that at the 19 and above, those players should be able to manage it better. And so what we did is, and that's where the rule came from. And we tried a number of different instances. We ran it past a bunch of people. And I was, you call me the author of the rule, but there was a lot of input and a lot of people's a lot of people involved in the of being authors of that rule.
Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate it. Hey, you made me sound great. That's awesome. You basically took the whole thing. That's great.
Mike, anything additional you want to say?
No, I got nothing.
I didn't think so.
I think it's important. I think it's important to note, Mike and Justin, that it doesn't have to be a pitcher catcher. Obviously, catcher pitcher get-togethers are the most common ones, but it can be any 2 defensive players on the diamond who get together, or 2 or more, and so it doesn't have to be it's not limited to pitchers and catchers.
Well, thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Very welcome.
Thanks. Thanks again. Justin, can you go back to the last slide, please?
I thought Jeff said it all. Why are
You
we going
did, I know.
backwards?
But I gotta get something in here. I gotta look. So like the biggie that I wanted to just kind of mention is time it doesn't need to be called. So just some of the parameters of the rule again. Time doesn't need to be called. It's a player-to-player discussion, and at least one defensive player has to leave his or her position, and it must cause a delay. If they're yelling across the diamond at each other and they're in position, but they're yelling across the diamond, that's fine. Let them do it. Let them yell at each other. They're ready to go. They're in fair territory. Let's play. I just want to touch on that a little bit, and we have to be. You can go to the next slide, Justin. We have to be diligent in calling this, and it's been around since 2019, and from what I hear, the PW is using it. Jamie said in our little pre-meeting earlier, the OASA is gonna ramp it up this year, and they're gonna start using it. So we need to make sure that we're calling it. Just one of the other little things is if the second conference happens after an at bat, you're adding a ball to the new batter's count. Um, and there is some umpire discretion here on charging them on the second time, and we'll get into a little bit of that in the game management part of it. But you do have a little bit of leeway, but you really have to be careful with how you manage that if you're going to give that leeway. But that's great. Thanks again, Jeff. Great to hear from the guy that had a big part in it. Thank you.
Not a problem. If I'm going to take off here, I'm on Grampy duty tonight. You didn't, you guys didn't meet him, but he's right here in my arms now. But I do, if I can, just take one moment to congratulate Mike. We just found out today that Mike will be representing Canada at the men's Pan American qualifier in Parana, Argentina in the middle of April, late April. So congratulations, Mike, on that appointment.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for thinking of me.
See you guys all later.
Okay, see you, Jeff.
Yeah.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Okay. So let's move things along then to umpire conferences. So this is the last type of conference that we're covering during our session tonight. So I'm just going to put all this on the screen here. The what, where, why, and how. So it's not all of the questions, but it's most of them. So first of all, when we're talking about an umpire conference, what is it? We're talking about a moment in the game where the umpires are getting together to confer or talk about something. It could be a ruling, it could be a judgment on a play that just happened. So that's the what. Where? So ideally, these umpire to umpire conferences happen away from players and away from coaches. This doesn't mean you got to go and run away to the outfield to have your conference, but you definitely want to create some space such that you can have a private conversation without people peeking over your shoulder or trying to eavesdrop on your conversation. And yes, this might actually involve you turning around and giving them one of these, like, you know, let's say it's a men's game. Fellas, give us some space. We're talking about it. That will encourage them to take a couple steps back without you having to, you know, relocate your conference to maybe the outfield grass. So the why, this is very important. When you're having an umpire to umpire conference, the why are you doing it is very, like, you have to be aware of this. So I'm going to give you an answer that I think is a very bad answer. And this is my opinion, but I'm also going to back it up with a couple of talking points. Here's why you shouldn't have an umpire to umpire conference. Well, because the coach really thinks we should, or to appease the coach. And I wanted to get that one out of the way right away, because I know there are umpires that believe that that is a good idea, to appease the coach, because the coach really, really wants us to get together and talk about this, that we're going to do it. I think that is setting a bad precedent for other instances in the game where a coach might really, really want you to do something, and you just did it at you know, this umpire to umpire conference. Maybe there's something else that the coach can get you to, you know, to do because they really, really want you to. So I wanted to get that out of there right away. But here's why you do, because you want to get the call right. So if you have any doubt about getting the call right or getting the ruling right, that's why you should have an umpire to umpire conference, to get the call right, not because somebody wants you to. And for the how, this is more related to the conversation that takes place. So let's just say the conference relates to a play at, I'll make up something, a fair foul call down the right field line. And it's supposed to be the plate umpire's call. And wouldn't you know it, just as they step out onto the line, the catcher or the first base fielder obstructs their view. They make the call, and let's say they call it fair, and then there's a big uproar about it being fair or foul, and the umpire goes, man, I don't know if I saw that correctly. Okay, now is a good time to have that conference. So how it works is all of the umpires, whether you're working 2 umpire, 3 umpire, 4 umpire, get all the umpires together, because if you're going to take any time at all to hash this out, you better get all the information that you can. So never should 2 out of the 3 umpires confer. Get all 3 in there, all right, if it's a 3 umpire game. And the umpire whose call it was should be leading the conversation, and they should be asking some very direct questions like, you know, first of all, probably describing what they had. Hey, I've got a fly ball down the right field line. I got my catcher jumping in front of me and the first baseman straddling the line. Okay, I think I've got it fair, but based on everybody's reactions, I'm not so sure. What have you got? And then the other umpire should then speak up and say what they've got. And if they've got something different, they should make sure that they're heard. And if they don't have anything different, they should also just say that. That conference should be short and sweet and to the point, such that when you leave that conference, there will not be a need to reconfer on that matter. And the umpire whose call it was coming out of that conference, they should be making that call. If it's a fair or foul call, they should be able to just loudly announce the call and move the game forward. If it's a safer out dispute, they should be able to then make that safer out call and move forward. If and only if the umpire feels that they must talk to a coach to explain something, should there be an explanation that follows. I've seen a lot of umpire to umpire conferences. They get together and then they come out of that conference and you'll see an umpire go walk to a coach. And everybody involved in the game is like, what's going on? What's happening there? They're all confused. You know, so at some point the call needs to be announced for everybody in the game. And then if and only if they need to talk to the coach, should they do that? What shouldn't happen is you get together, you conference, you make your call, it goes against one of the teams, and then that coach now wants to have an argument. That's a perfect time to park that coach, say, no, coach, we've talked about it, we're moving the game forward, and let them know that, no, you don't want to talk about it. Now, if they insist on coming to talk to you about it, well, now this comes into a game management issue of, should that coach be staying in the game or should they be going based on what you just told them? Okay. We want to move the game forward. We just stop the game as umpires to confer on something to get it right. Now that we feel like we've got it right, we need to move the game forward. So there shouldn't be any lingering stuff that comes out of that conference unless it's absolutely necessary. If you're doing a one umpire game, your umpire to umpire conferences are very simple. Let's move on. All right. So we now get into some game management ideas and we kind of double back on these 4 different kinds of conferences that we've talked about so far. And so Mike is going to lead you through a certain situation here as it relates to offensive conferences. And you're muted, Mike.
I said earlier that you don't allow the second conference on an offensive conference. You just don't allow it. But what do you do if this coach has really been a pain in the butt for the last 4 innings and you gotta get a jail free card here because he wants a second charge conference? Do you throw him out? Say, yeah, sure, go ahead, coach. Yeah, take all the time you need. Not a problem. And then as soon as he's done, you eject him? No. That's kind of a bush league move. We don't want to get into that. If a coach is being a pain in the butt for the last 4 innings, you need to be dealing with that. You can't. First of all, why is it lasting for 4 innings? You should have dealt with that much sooner. So, like the biggest thing in here is you don't want to allow it, and you don't want to use it as a free ejection of a pain in the butt coach. Deal with the pain in the butt coach and why he's being a pain in the butt. Deal with that. Don't use this as a, hey, I can throw this guy out. Because if your supervisor is sitting up at a provincial and Daryl Way's sitting up there and now she's got to deal with a coach that just got ejected because he took a second offensive charge conference and the plate umpire allowed it. Now she's got to deal with a bit of a storm that she doesn't want to deal with. So don't get into that situation and use it for a free ejection.
All right. Thanks, Mike. So my game management comment regarding defensive conferences. So we saw that animation slide about the, regular, routine, ordinary defensive conference in terms of, as an umpire, what do you do, right? Call time, coach starts heading out, you move to swipe to sweep the plate, all that stuff. Well, I've got an exception to throw at you here, and it's, what if you think that trip is about your strike zone? And when I say that, what I mean is, and yes, I'm speaking from personal experience, right? You're back there, you're working your butt off, you're trying to judge that strike zone the best you can. And it's probably a certain pitch that they're hot about. It's a certain location or a certain type of pitch that they're throwing that they really want or really need. And maybe you're balling it when they think it should be a strike. And so you can see the pitcher is frustrated, and maybe even the catcher is frustrated. And now the coach calls time. And sometimes it's even how they call time, not even just the fact that they call time, but that conference is going to be about your strike zone. I do not recommend that you come out from behind the plate and sweep the plate and then go meet them up the baseline. Go meet them at the circle. If this is about the strike zone and you have every reason to believe that it is, go out there, okay? You're taking charge of the situation. You're not out there to defend your strike zone or to have a debate about your strike zone. In fact, you're probably getting out there to tell them to knock it off. Maybe the pitcher's huffing and puffing and kicking some dirt after these pitches, and maybe the catcher has even turned around on you a couple of times. Maybe the coach has barked out a couple of things from the bench, and now they're having this conference. Perfect time to get out there and end all of that nonsense. Okay, so this is a game management idea as it relates to a defensive conference, not necessarily about the rules themselves, but don't always do the exact same routine every time just because it's a routine. Sometimes you need to deviate from your routine for specific reasons, and for me, this is definitely one of them. Get out there. Now, don't enter that circle. You're not going to go out there and go nose to nose with somebody because you're trying to take charge. But go out to the circle. All right. More than likely, you're going to have at least two people facing you, hopefully from their side of the circle, and they'll probably have something to say. It's better to have it in that forum and end it in that forum than the bickering and the kicking of the dirt or the catcher turning around or holding those pitches on you and those kinds of things. So that's my one that I wanted to throw in there. Mike, back to you regarding the pace of play rule.
So the pace of play rule it's kind of similar to the 1 foot in the batter's box rule that came out not too long ago, and we there was a lot of times we didn't get it right, because as soon as the batter stepped out of the batter's box, no matter what, you have an extra strike on you. They weren't really causing a delay. There's an extra strike. So we got to be careful with this because they've given us a bit of leeway on allowing a second one in the same defensive inning. Now, we have the discretion to do that, but we have to be careful with it. And it's mainly going to be a pitcher to catcher situation. Pitcher and catcher, they're not on the same page. They might, it could be a Canadian Championship situation where one of them's an add-on at the last minute, and they don't even know each other's names. So you got to be careful about that because you don't want to be back there wearing rise balls in the mask. But you can't just keep allowing it to have extra ones because they're not on the same page. So if you're going to allow an extra one in the same defensive inning, you're going to accompany it. It's a chaperone situation. You're going with the catcher, and they have about 3 Mississippis, and it's over, and you're running back to spot, and you're dragging the catcher with you. Now, if it's me, I'm not allowing any more than one extra. And I might go as far as I'm not allowing anyone to have any more than one up. I'm not allowing to have one team to have any more than one up on the other team. And this might be where you want to really keep track of trips. And when you get into, you get one every inning, or sometimes two, you really got to keep track of it. You got to write it down. It's a good way to kind of, you can say, no, I'm not allowing it because the other team's down one, you're up one. So until you guys are even, you're not going up one. So it's just another way of maybe managing it, because you do have a little bit of leeway there. But if you're allowing the second one, make sure you're chaperoning it and it's quick.
Good, Mike. Yeah. So, and I'm just going to use the word there. You've alluded to it, but the idea of a signals cross up, right? That's an escorted one. And like you say, you get one of those, not three of those in inning. Oh, I think we got our singles crossed again, Umpy, that kind of thing. So yeah, good. And then the last one that I have on here. So game management ideas, unnecessary umpire conferences. And this just simply gets back to the idea of having conferences because there's conflict or because the coach really, really wants you to have a conference. Here locally in Chatham, I, do my best to try and mentor some of our younger umpires. So I'm out at their games. I actually have a ball diamond just at the end of the street there. A lot of our minor games happen there. And as much as I'd like to be there more often, I'm also out umpiring my own games. But I see this happen. And I'm not saying that coaches do it because they like to see if they can pull the puppet strings per se on a young umpire. But yeah, coaches who want umpires to have conferences just so it looks like they're somehow in charge. These unnecessary umpire conferences, we need to knock it off. We have conferences to get the call right. If we've got the call right already, or we feel like we've got the call right already, then it's totally fine to deny a coach's request to say, hey, can you get together with your partner? No, coach, I've got this. That's my call. I saw it. We're moving on. We're always out to try and get the coaches to respect us. And yes, sometimes getting together with your partner to get the call right is a way to gain respect with the coaches. But it's always sometimes telling them no. As much as they might not like it in the moment, maybe a few moments after that, they look at that and that's a way of gaining respect from coaches as well, is taking ownership of your calls and your role as the umpire. So our summary slide looks like this. Questions? And I suppose the best way, or if you've got something really short and sweet, is to type it in the chat, but especially as these relate to perhaps game management issues or questions, it's probably best to simply unmute your microphone. And Mike would be happy to answer all your questions.
Does anybody have any questions for these two? Don't let them off easy.
I have a question. So for U13 and under, there will be no limit to the pitching conferences, right?
Yes, Nicole, to the defensive conferences, there is nothing in the rule books that limit how many defensive conferences for U13 and below. That is true.
So how can I help my younger umpires who will be pretty much exclusively umpiring this to help control that situation?
So, Nicole, that's a great question. And man, if nobody asked that, then I wouldn't know what to say about this presentation. So, Nicole, if you don't mind me asking you, what do you think is a good strategy for helping coach up your younger umpires? What do you think would be something to tell them or some guidelines to suggest to them?
Well, I just know it's going to be difficult for them generally because game management is difficult to start off really young. So just trying to encourage them to speak up when they feel like it's too much, but sometimes they just let it happen. I'm
Sure.
worried about that.
For sure. So, and I guess, Nicole, something to kind of consider is why is this rule different for youth 13 and below? And this certainly gets into the idea of we got players that are just learning how to play, pitchers that are learning how to pitch. And if we're talking about like a local house league game or something similar, the idea of if these conferences are for instructional or coaching purposes, that's exactly why there is no rule. Sometimes a team needs more than just a small handful of opportunities to have a coach give some instructions or sometimes some encouragement to a player. So the big thing comes down to, is it delaying, like unnecessarily delaying the game, especially when we get into time limited games. So when we get into time limited games, that's the biggest consideration, I would say, Nicole, for like, gosh, what do umpires have to think about or consider? And I don't have any magic words because let's face it, this is totally dependent on the umpire on the field, the coach who is maybe taking too many conferences for the liking of that umpire. The big thing would be to definitely suggest your umpires to be consistent with both teams. Okay. So if one team has had, let's say, 4 conferences in the game and the other team hasn't had any, and let's just say the team that it has had the 4 conferences is leading by a few runs and the time limit is getting kind of close. So the other team is like, man, like, no, come on, we're getting close on time. That's something that the umpire should be aware of, such that it shouldn't take the other team to make the plea that, hey, what's up with all these conferences? Conferences are fine, but you can also limit the timing of them. So if this is the 4th conference now of the game, or the 5th or the 6th, and time limit is getting close, it's totally fine for you to instruct your umpires to have them, sweep the plate quickly and then head out to the pitching circle and say, okay, coach, we got to go. Okay, coach, we got to move this game along. Some sorts of encouraging words to try and get that coach to wrap it up real fast and then hustle back into position and let's try and resume the game. We don't have any hard, fast rules unless there is a local rule that a house league or a local ball association has put into play for that kind of thing.
Yeah, it looks like Mitch has got a comment on this. Do you want to come on, Mitch?
Thanks, Jamie. Yeah, guys, here's a circumstance. Let's assume that the pitcher has already won charged conference against some defensive charge conference. Now, the first base person calls time, and there's a conversation between the first base person and the coach, their coach from the dugout, or the third baseman, let's say, depending on which dugout. There's a conversation. At that point, right after that conversation, the third baseman or the first base person now goes over to the pitcher and takes 2 steps and says something and then goes back. Is that a charge conference?
Yes.
Is that the second charge conference on the pitcher? Just maybe we should cover that circumstance.
Sure, Mitch, I'll grab that one there. So defensive conferences don't necessarily need to involve the pitcher. Defensive conference can be a third base fielder and their coach. That is deemed to be a defensive conference at all levels of play. Now, again, at U13 and below, there's no penalty for that conference in terms of counting how many, but that's a conference, whether or not they relay something onto the pitcher or not. What I don't think you want to do as an umpire is hit them for a conference when the third base fielder talks to the coach, and then hit him with another one when that third base fielder immediately goes to the pitcher. So in other words, there's no circumventing this. It's did the defensive team, cause a delay such that there was a, conferring, if I could use the word conference, but use it in an active way. And that can just be coached to any fielder. such that that is a defensive conference under Softball Canada's
I
interpretation.
think, Justin, though, the consequence is a bit different because the second charge conference on with a pitcher, does that not result in that pitcher being removed from the pitching position for the game as compared to a coach being ejected who insists on it?
So a defensive team, if we're talking U19, U17 and
right.
not Mitch, we're talking 3 per game, right?
Right.
So if we are at that second conference, and now it's the third conference, which I think is what you're getting at is, so that third conference is also a freebie. It's the fourth one. So if they've had 3, and now you see a coach trying to relay a message to a fielder, and a fielder is wanting to now say, "What's that, coach?" and leaning over toward the dugout, you might quickly, as an umpire, say, "You've already had 3. You've already had 3," trying to abbreviate and cut that off. But we also can't stop them from having a fourth one. And if they have a fourth one, wow, we're having a pitching change right now.
Okay, so we no longer are having the pitcher removed on that third conference or fifth conference, depending on whoever it is, from the pitching position for the game. That's what I was just trying to get at, because once the person is removed from the pitching position, they can't come back to pitch, but now they're ejected, so that's not an issue anymore.
So the pitcher does become an illegal pitcher. They can stay in the game in some
Right.
other role, but they won't be pitching anymore.
Right. Okay, so we're that's still the same with regards to the pitcher. They just can't pitch anymore.
Right.
Yeah, and that's why I was that's why I wanted to use the example of the pitcher already having 2 charge conferences, or the team having 2 charge conferences, and the third one's with the pitcher type thing.
Okay, is there any other questions? We're at 8 o'clock, but if there's questions, we want to answer them.
Look at Freddie's beautiful head there. Look at Freddie.
I got a question. Going back to the defensive conference, say the pitcher, the coach comes out and talks to the pitcher, and going by the Bradford rule, you go down the line, clean the base, take your time, you go to the mound, and say the pitcher, the coach refuses to leave. He wants to spend another 30, 40 seconds. What do you do about that?
That's a
Mike?
good one, Brett.
Freddie,
That's a really good one.
I love to turn those questions into other questions. Freddie, tell us what you're doing.
What do you mean what I'm doing?
What are you going to do in that situation, Fred?
Hey?
And in all sincerity, Fred, what do you think is the thing for the umpire to do? Because let's face it, they could stand there with I don't know, and just wait it out. Well, that can't be a solution. Gosh. So they could ding him with what? A second conference by refusing to end the first one. Okay, fine. We'll get on to the second conference. Are you thinking something else?
No, Justin, what I would do is go over there. If he continues to keep talking, I'm going to tell him, Coach, that's enough. You've had your say. Okay, and if he continues, what are you going to do? Kick him out? I don't know. I don't know what
You could.
I don't know what the proper rule on that is, but
No, you could.
you
Um,
can.
No, the other thing you could do is you could, if he takes too long, you could charge him with a
Double conference?
defensive delay. I'm
And
hitting you with this. I'm hitting you with this too.
What's the penalty for a defensive delay, Mike?
Well, the first one's free. And then the second one in the same inning is a ball to the
A
back.
ball. Okay. So like obviously,
But it's not really the proper application of the rule, but you could use it.
no, but obviously in that situation, you don't want to throw the coach out, but you
No.
don't want him to make a mockery and make you look weak,
True.
So
Yeah.
that's what like you said, game management, what's the best way to handle that? You know, like I said, I would go up to the coach and I would tell him, coach, you've had your say. That's enough. Let's go. Let's play ball. Okay.
Yeah.
Then you're going to go towards home plate. And if he stays there, you know,
Well, I
That's-
think that the best thing I think to do is I'm gonna do is threaten them with a second one. You're taking too long, coach. Now you're gonna use up another one here pretty soon. Like,
so
you're
that
out.
other conference, you're going to charge him for
Yeah,
like,
sure. Why not?
say that was the second conference.
So you'd
or
have
no.
to say play ball, time.
Oh, see, you got to go back behind the plate.
Yeah.
Okay. So now say
You don't
for
have to. You don't have to go. Well, you probably
Okay.
should, but
Okay.
if you want him out of there, you can go back behind the plate, play ball, count to about 2, and then call time again. And then you're gonna walk back out and say, now you've used up 2.
Okay. But say that was the third conference. Okay.
Well, now you're really pushing it now, Fred. Holy moly.
So if I could jump in, like, let's face it, context is everything, Fred, and the personalities involved could very, very differently judge how you would do this. But the way you've described it, Fred, you know, the team has had their defensive conference. You've gone out there and said, okay, here we go. And they don't budge or they don't stop their conversation. You say, hey, we're wrapping this up. And if they say, no, we've got to talk some more. I think the threat of the second conference
Should do it.
it should be enough to either have one of two things happen. Them to be completely dismissive of everything you're doing, in which case, what would you do in similar situation in the game where you tell a coach or player to do something and they dismissively say no? You usually get rid of them, because if you had to fall back to something in the rule book, hey, when players or coaches, I don't know how to put the language, like purposely do not follow the instructions of the umpire, that's ejectable. Okay. Now, Freddie, back to your point, of course you don't want to eject coaches in that you're not looking for it, but you got to have something to fall back on here. Yes, you could ding them with a second conference, but even the threat of the second conference should wrap it up. And if it doesn't, well, something else I think is about to transpire.
Yeah.
Okay, Justin, what I'm saying is now, say he comes out for his third conference, okay? The coach, okay? And then you do your thing, you go over, okay, coach, let's play ball. No, he takes another 20, 30 seconds. So really, that's basically the fourth conference. Do you throw the coach out or the pitcher or what?
So let's be clear. Nobody gets ejected on a fourth conference. Just there has to be a pitching change.
Okay.
So if it's a third conference and it's going on way too long and you go out there and say, let's wrap this up, and they say no, or I don't think so, or some other combination of words, you tell them, listen, if this gets to a fourth conference, you're going to be changing your pitcher here in a couple seconds. So wrap it up. And maybe that's exactly what they're going to do anyway. So hey, you don't want to eject a coach, but you also don't want to assign unnecessary conferences. That team might really need those conferences later on in the game.
Yeah.
So I think you have to let them know,
They should have thought of that.
if you don't wrap this up, this is what I'm going to do. And I would threaten them with the additional conference first.
And then the
If
pitcher
personalities really get heightened, well, then we can certainly end this another way.
So basically, in that situation, when you're having the coach, you're telling the coach, you don't kick the coach out, but if he gets fragrant with his language and that, then you remove him, obviously. So you try to keep him in the game. So there'll be the fourth conference, and then you have to change the picture. That's the only penalty. Nobody gets thrown out.
Or
Right?
you can throw him out. If he's being belligerent, throw him
No,
out.
but he's not. He's just taking his sweet time, trying to, 20, 30 seconds later, you tell him that's your third, okay? And he takes his time, so you tell him that's your fourth conference, and then they change the pitchers. Is that what you're saying, right?
I want to be on your diamond when you do that to him, though.
Well,
I want
I've
to
never
be
had
your
that
base.
happen, but
I want to be your base umpire when that happens.
why?
Oh, I love that. That's great.
I might
So-
power slam them.
Any other questions? Or otherwise, we'll just wrap this up right here. Mike, Justin, thank you so much for a great presentation, very informative. I'm looking forward to using some of this very, very shortly. Mike's
Yes.
lucky enough to get to use it before the rest of us by the sounds of it, but
Yeah.
hopefully we get some warm weather coming and we can get out on the diamond. And thank you all for tuning in tonight. If Justin and Mikey just want to hold on for a second, we'll just have a quick chat when we're done.
Yep.
Everybody else, thank you for coming.
Have a good
Thanks,
night,
everyone. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Jamie, I just got a question about the zone lists.
Yep.